Might be helpful at this point if I read a statement of evidence from Sergeant Want, because it does refer to what's happened in the past and it does refer to the actual email that's been received. Now, I'm going to read from this statement. You're probably going to have some questions in relation to this, okay? So, Sergeant Want, his collar number is 1824, as I say, he's been the sergeant at Sherborne for several years now. He's provided a statement of evidence in relation to this investigation, and this is what he says. On the 20th of October 2009, I met with a male who I now know to be Graham Ford. Mr. Ford wanted to report to me some circumstances that he believed were crimes, and he attended Sherborne Police Station to do so. I spent nearly an hour listening to Mr. Ford, and what he was telling me made me concerned for the state of his mental health. He was informing me that he was being sexually abused by cyber intrusion at regular intervals. Also telling me that images from his passport photo had been used in advertising at a local fashion shop in Sherborne, and the images had been obtained via cyber intrusion. There were 4 or 5 similar stories which were all based on the fact that he had been subject of cyber intrusion. I asked him how cyber intrusion worked, and he explained that he had read an article in the Guardian paper in 2003 about a scientist who had learnt how to control certain parts of his body by inserting a microchip in his body. Mr. Ford said he had the same thing but did not have a chip inserted. He was asking me to record crimes from what he had told me and quoted the victim's code. I explained that I had concerns over what he was telling me and asked him if he had told his friends or family. He said he had, but they did not listen or want to speak to him about it. He said that he had not spoken to his GP for a while. I advised him to visit his GP and discuss the matter, but he did not seem keen to do that. He left my office following this advice, understanding that I was not going to record any crimes, as I believed his issue was a mental health one, possibly schizophrenia. Following our meeting, I made a number of calls to local GP clinics in the area to try and identify his GP, but was unsuccessful. I contacted the Sherborne Community Mental Health Team, and they advised that to do a proactive visit to Mr. Ford, they would need a referral from his GP. The matter was left until a few months later. I don't recall the exact dates, but I was informed that Mr. Ford had made a complaint against police, specifically against me for not recording his crimes. Sergeant Turner was allocated the complaint to look into, and as a result I completed a report dated the 19th of March, which I submitted to Sergeant Turner. I was aware that Mr. Ford had previously targeted abuse at a senior police officer from Avon and Somerset Police. This made me concerned and alarmed by the fact he was now complaining about me, and not knowing what his intentions were or what he was capable of doing. And all this despite having already been dealt with for a harassment type offence against a police officer. I felt very uneasy. A few months following his complaint, I don't recall the exact date, I was at the monthly town council meeting in Newland, Sherborne. I could see Mr. Ford sat in the public area quite close to me. I stood up to present the month's crime figures, which took about 10 minutes. Following this, there were the usual questions from the councillors before the public gets a chance to ask anything. The public rarely, if ever, ask a question. However, Mr. Ford stood up and said words to the effect that Sergeant Want is an ineffective police officer and should not be working in Sherborne, and that Sergeant Want failed to record crimes that he had reported. This made me feel very alarmed by what he was saying, and now I was feeling harassed and targeted. After all, I had done nothing wrong, and now Mr. Ford was telling the town council, most of whom I had known for quite a few years during my service in Sherborne, that I had failed in my duties. I was clearly unable to give an account as to my previous dealings with Mr. Ford, and remained quiet for the council to draw their own conclusions. The mayor at the time quizzed Mr. Ford on his accusations, which were that I had failed to investigate or record his irregular bank transactions. The mayor suggested he speaks to the bank, but Mr. Ford tried to argue that it was a police issue. The mayor stood by his advice and told him to speak to the bank, and the matter was concluded. I felt supported by the mayor and council, but clearly due to data protection could not give them any background. Mr. Ford then sat down, and I left feeling quite distressed and alarmed by his behaviour. The transactions he mentioned relate to him being charged twice for a direct debit. He had explained to me in our first encounter that the bank and courts had colluded to make this happened, so that he did not have enough funds in his account to travel to Taunton to hear his appeal at Crown Court for speeding. When I asked him when he was appealing the speeding, he said that he was being sexually abused in his vehicle at the time by cyber intrusion. I did not hear from Mr. Ford again until Friday the 17th of August 2012. I was on duty at Sherborne doing a late shift. Near the start of the shift, around 1900 hours, I checked my emails and saw that one had been forwarded to me from the Police Inquiry Centre. It had been sent to them from the following email address, grahamford1@yahoo.co.uk. It said the following: Sergeant Jed Want is a sex offender and his continued aiding and abetting of sexual offenders justifies reasonable force against him and them in accordance with the Sexual Offenders Act 2003. Get them off. When I read this, I immediately felt very uneasy and shocked that Mr. Ford was now targeting me and trying to get me in trouble with A, my employers, B, the public. I'm unsure what he intends to do next, and I'm fearful that he is not getting treated for his health matters, and this can result in his behaviour towards me becoming more persistent and serious, including maybe physical, considering the content of the above email. I am sure that the email has been written by Graham Ford because of his quoting of police legislation, which he does a lot, and the sexual references and the email address. I feel that his behaviour will continue towards me until he is dealt with by police, and also in a medical capacity regarding his health. Graham, I know that's a lot. I think it touches on a lot that we've already discussed, but you are more than welcome to comment on that.
There is some serious falsehoods in that statement.
Serious what, sorry?
Falsehoods.
Falsehoods?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm quite surprised, but I'd like to I could point them out to you if you want. I haven't got a copy of that, but Sergeant Want knew, without any prompting, the identity of a young woman associated with me regarding private and undisclosed sexual activity.
Right.
That is sexual voyeurism. Now, the fact that Sergeant Want knew that and refused a minimum service is aiding and abetting a sex offender, because voyeurism is prohibited under the Sexual Offenders Act. And aiding and abetting it is prohibited under Section 62 of that Act.
Right.
Now, that is true.
So I'm
but to say that it's no mention of that in the witness statement.
No, there's not. Sorry, who is the lady? I don't quite understand.
I don't want to disclose her identity today.
What's the situation that you're referring to? I don't quite understand what you mean.
I've explained that situation already. Someone associated with myself regarding private, consenting sexual activity.
With you?
Yes.
Right.
Between the two of us. Sergeant Want knew the identity of that woman without any disclosure of that information from me.
I see. Right, let me get this right. You were in a relationship with a lady?
No, I'm not.
You were?
I worded that situation in the only way I'm going to today.
Right.
What I have done is unlawful.
No.
Sergeant Want knew the identity of that woman.
Right.
You do understand about knowing the identity of a woman. That is what Sergeant Want knew, and he disclosed that to me. And her rhetoric referring to her improperly was part of the evidence I supplied to him. He didn't want to look at that evidence, but disclosed knowing the identity of that woman without any prompting from me. Do you understand?
Not really, Graham, no.
No.
I'm a bit confused.
Well, you wouldn't sort of be indifferent to it then? If you were in my position?
I don't understand.
No, so would you not be indifferent to that occurring to
Graham,
you?
you spoke to Sergeant Want. What are you suggesting that Sergeant Want didn't investigate? Please, in simple terms, explain to us what Sergeant Want didn't investigate with the female.
All I know is that Sergeant Want knew the identity of that woman. Through
what woman?
I've explained what woman. Okay.
You haven't explained.
I have. It was on tape. I said a woman associated with myself involving sexual activity.
Right. I get that bit. You were having a relationship with somebody.
And Sergeant Want
Right.
knew the identity of that woman
Right.
before I disclosed
I
any
see.
identity of anyone
Right.
I
to
see.
him.
So you're saying Sergeant Want was aware of your situation before you came to see him?
I'm saying today that Sergeant Want disclosed that he knew the identity of that woman.
I see. And how did he know that?
That was the issue.
Was
He
that
disclosed-
was your concern?
Yeah.
I see.
And because it's private sexual activity,
Yes.
and not the only example of that kind of disclosure, he
Right.
is a thought.
He's what, sorry?
I'm not, you've got to understand what happened. I'm quite prepared to disclose the details of what happened at the meeting, and one of them was that he disclosed the identity of a woman who I hadn't discussed with him at all.
Right. When was this?
During our meeting, October 2009.
Right.
So you're saying, right, to just get it in simple terms, that Sergeant Want talked about, mentioned or stated a woman's name, a female's name, that was in a relationship with you. Is that correct, Graham?
Yeah, okay. I'm only going to say associated with myself
Right.
regarding sexual activity.
Right.
Consenting sexual
Yes.
activity. Okay. Can you word that as well, the same way? Or
What sort of sexual
yeah.
activity was it, Graham?
I'm not elaborating.
Okay.
on
No,
that. You've got to understand
No.
that, because it's not the bait, May, or the woman.
No, I entirely
Sergeant Want
agree.
disclosed the identity.
Okay.
How did that make you feel?
Well, how I felt, I was shocked
Mm.
and quite, something something you've worked on, and the minimum service from the police is something the police have worked on, but something else was dominating our meeting.
Right, so you're saying that the emphasis of the meeting was put on talking about your sexual relationship with this woman and not actually dealing
Well, all I
with
can
the
say-
issue with the bank.
All I can say, there was, two issues, but I had to work on the most evident because I haven't got investigatory powers in normal day-to-day.
Okay.
I've come here today to say that Sergeant Want disclosed the identity of a woman
Right.
involved in sexual activity between us
Right.
and myself,
Right.
and I have not disclosed any such information
Right.
to Sergeant Want,
I see.
but it was part of his refusal of the minimum service. Now that is something you might question, I mean, I understand police are human as well, but with a real problem, then I'm not, I set a precedent to the minimum service.
Right.
So Graham, I'll put it to you now, because of that meeting and because of your feelings, did you send that email to Sergeant Want because you weren't happy with his response? It's a very simple question, and based on what you've been telling me so far, I can see you're cross and you're angry, and if that's how you feel, yet you're not willing to tell us whether you sent us that email, which is basically telling us what you're telling us now.
I've told you already that I'm not answering that question.
Okay, I've got to ask you.
Well, it will be the same answer.
Okay. Thank you, Graham. There is one other statement, Graham, which is from the lady at the Police Inquiry Centre that actually received the email and had to open it. So I do have a statement to say that she was working at that time, and that at 23:33 hours she opened the email from that was sent to Dot Inquiries, and we've already stated what it said, and she just confirms the email address. And she says at the bottom of her statement, I felt that the comments made against Sergeant Want were malicious and offensive, and forwarded the email to Sergeant Want and Inspector Whitley for their attention. I then filed the email in the sent folder held within the inquiry's mailbox. So that's just, from my point of view, giving some continuity of the fact that she received the email and then she sent it on to Sergeant Want. Do you understand that? Okay. So, Graham, we've spoken about quite a lot here, all to do with the same kind of issues, and you've been very open and frank and discussed most of it with me, appreciating that you didn't want to comment on some of the questions that I did ask you. Just to summarise again, so that you are clear, we're talking about an offence of sending by public communications network an offensive or indecent or obscene or menacing message or matter. And the issues that I'm looking at are that on the 16th of August 2012 at 23:33 hours, an email was sent via a public communications network to Dorset Police, the address being .inquiries, and that the message that was sent is considered to be menacing. I've already said what the message is. It relates to Sergeant Want, and just to confirm, the email address is grahamford1@yahoo.co.uk. That's just summarising what I'm looking at in the offence. Because of the information I have, and because of the email address and the situation, I believe you did send that message. I'm just going to ask you one more time, Graham. Did you send that message?
I'm not answering that question.
Okay. All right. Thank you. P.C. Andrews, do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm quite happy with that now. But the computer that you had, you admitted that you've had one computer, is the same computer that you would have had at the time of that alleged communication. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Graham. There is one more thing that I do want to talk about. It doesn't relate to this email or this offence, but it relates to you and when you have had dealings with the police before. In 2006, Graham, you attended, sorry, just bear with me, you attended West Dorset Magistrates Court, where you were found guilty of harassment in relation to an Avon and Somerset police officer, and that related to making two separate telephone calls to the District Commander of Somerset Constabulary, and they were offensive messages. What can you tell me about that?
I was being assaulted by officers under his command at the time.
Right. I just want to make it clear, obviously I'm not re-investigating this matter.
No.
What's important to me is that you do have a previous conviction which does strike some similarities. I find it quite important to me that it seems a little bit similar to what I'm investigating today. That's the reason that I'm discussing this. Okay, so I want to make it clear that I'm not asking any questions to investigate it. It was just the similarities.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that you have that previous conviction?
I do.
Yeah.
I'm challenging it in the future.
Are you?
I am, because I was being assaulted, or people that were assaulting me were assisted by an officer under that senior officer's command at the time.
Right.
And part 2 of the Harassment Act, my duty officer didn't state it in court, but I did.
Right.
And I was still convicted. That is to say, an offence has not been committed under reasonable grounds.
Are you willing?
Most people would use an expletive as being assaulted.
So that's the end of the tape.
41 minutes.
How many have we got left? A couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Right, I've literally got a couple of minutes left, Graham. We can use some more tapes if we need to, but can you just
Can you explain that, please?
There's 45 minutes on each tape, so
yeah, and you can use more tapes.
What I mean is, if we need to carry on with the interview and go beyond 45 minutes, we fill these ones and start some new ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's still recording as we speak.
Yeah.
Just quickly, I just wanted to, you said that you were being assaulted by officers. Can you tell me what you mean?
I don't wish to answer that question either.
Okay.
Because...
Okay. As I say, I'm not...
I have done.
Yeah, I'm not investigating that.
I mean, what you've got to understand is, I've been convicted
Yeah.
in a court of law
Yeah.
where those events did occur.
Okay.
Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Graham. I think that's quite a good time to end the interview. I must be honest, I don't have any further questions. It's not that I'm rushing because I want to get in before the tapes end. We can carry on with more tapes, but I don't have any further questions. Do you wish to clarify anything that you have said, Graham?
Clarify?
Do you want to change it or make something clearer?
Only that Sergeant Want's witness statement